Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. It's album study day. Once again, we are going to be dissecting, talking about, deconstructing Trespass by Genesis. The second album. This one was picked by Ken Golden. He will actually be driving this episode here today. I will introduce everybody first. So again, Professor of Prog, Ken Golden, George Lemay, Eric Porter. Our center square is Anthony Ferraro, Chuck Alvarez, Louis Nasser, and Chad Hutchinson. What's up, everybody?
Hey, what's up?
Ready to talk Trespass?
Yeah.
Cool. With that, so as we've been doing for the last couple episodes, with these, we're going to talk. We're each going to give our take on these albums. We're going to tear them inside out. What I've done is I am passing the baton for these episodes over to various members of the panel so they can kind of drive the conversation. So I will just put on my panelist hat and turn it over to Ken. So Ken, it's all yours.
And Pete, of course, you have to look interested,
I have to look interested, right?
And be attentive, and
I don't want people to feel uncomfortable because I'm not talking enough, right?
Exactly.
Or that you're rushing us.
I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I know, right?
Exactly. So everybody's kind of is going to have their chance to pick an album for this album study. And I kind of thought about it in advance as far as what would I pick if I was given the choice. And when I guess it was Eric or Pete said, Ken, you going to do the next one? I knew right away what I wanted to do. And that was Trespass. So to me, in a sense, it's kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the Genesis catalog. It never gets talked about. And people watching this should know that I'm speaking from an American perspective. So the perspective in Europe may be very different. Part of the issue for that is that in the US, the album was licensed, Trespass was licensed through different labels. So it was never kind of considered part of like the Atlantic catalog over here, or it was released. In fact, the very first US version of Trespass was on Impulse Records, which was, essentially a jazz label, but they dabbled in rock, and eventually they did Impulse did license Trespass, and it wound up, and the label wound up getting sold to Liberty and then United Artists, and then MCA bought it. So even when the albums got reissued on CD and there was the definitive versions and then the SACDs, the Nick Davis remixes, they're different. They're on Virgin, and then if I remember, they're on Geffen. Trespass is on Geffen. So it's always kind of like, it's kind of just a little separate. And of course, we had the different lineup. So what's the story with this album? Their first album, everybody knows, was more of like I guess you would call it like a psychedelic pop album from Genesis to Revelation on Decca. It wasn't a prog rock album. Armando Gallo wrote this great book years ago. I don't know if any of you guys have it. And I know there've been other books, but this to me has always been like the Bible. And Armando talked about how, I guess it was 79 or so, the band retreated to Anthony Phillips' parents' cottage. 69. And they spent about, was it 69 or 70?
Yeah. 69.
And they spent a good 6 months there working on material. And they shedded like crazy, and they came up with this wealth of material, which wound up being used over the years. Some of it went out as late as The Lamb. So the lineup is not the lineup that we're used to. Anthony Phillips was the guitarist, and John Mayhew was the one and done drummer. So I think that has a lot to do with why we don't talk about Trespass all that much. We always think in terms of Steve Hackett and Phil Collins era of the band. And I think for many people's minds, Nursery Crime is where the Genesis story really starts. But really, the real prog era started with Trespass. I don't, from my perspective, I don't see it as radically different of an album than, let's say, Nursery Crime. Some of the material I think is interchangeable. I don't want to talk too much. I want everybody to say something. So I'm just going to run through my impressions of the album, very quickly. The production sucks. John Anthony did them no favors. Gabriel, I'm listening to the vinyl. Everybody's telling me that the CD, that the Nick Davis CD sounds infinitely better. The original vinyl, it sounds like there's a blanket thrown over Peter Gabriel's microphone. So he really dulls it. Yeah. Just kind of sucks. But good music, bad production. The instrumentation is okay in terms of clarity, but Gabriel's vocal, something really odd happened there. So I'm just going to run through the tracks real quick. It starts with Looking for Someone, which to me is like the prototypical Genesis tune. Could have fit on Nursery Crime. I think it's actually kind of starts out, to me, it almost reminds me of like a Marvin Gaye for some reason. You got White Mountain, that has the signature Tony Banks organ sound. They played it on the 76 tour with Phil. A lot of 12-string. And this song has a storyline, which was kind of like a trademark of Genesis. A lot of their songs, the lyrics told a story. Visions of Angels, for me, that was okay tune, kind of nondescript. Best thing I could say is it sounds like Genesis. It's not a particularly memorable tune. Stagnation, it was a really nice acoustic-based tune. I love Peter's vocals on it. And if you listen to Seconds Out on I Know What I Like during the when Phil is dicking around with his tambourine, Tony Banks quotes from Stagnation. Dusk, another nice 12-string piece, a lot of nice vocal harmonies. And then, you get to The Knife, which is the obvious standout track from the album. It's the heaviest piece, and it was a live staple of their shows. It's on Genesis Live, if I recall. Yep. They resurrected it at Earl's Court in 1977. They were playing it as one of the encores. It's just one of the greats. And in my opinion, it kind of got elevated with Hackett and Phil Collins playing on it. And that's kind of that's sort of what I have. It's not my favorite Genesis album, but I think it's a fine Genesis album. And I think it kind of fits in with everything else, just slightly different lineup. So I don't know. I'm going to actually start with George while he's still awake. George, you're the drummer.
Yeah.
What do you think of John Mayhew as a drummer? Relative, I don't know how deep you go in the Genesis catalog, but John Mayhew versus Phil Collins.
There's a noticeable difference. I mean, people are going to make a bigger deal out of it due to the names, but there are a couple tracks. For me, the best tracks are White Mountain and The Knife. And specifically, there's beat construction in there that is weak, that he could have done something way cooler. I'm hearing it as it's playing. I'm like, oh man, I wish I got to do that because I would have done this, Especially The Knife, the main beat in that. You put somebody like Bruford on that, it would have been so cool. I mean, it's a big missed opportunity. And he's a little stiff in general. He's not a very smooth player, so he does make a difference. In the end, it's not enough to make me look down on the tunes, because I think the tunes, like you were saying, like a lot of people they don't include this album in the run that they're known for.
Right.
And I think they should. For me, this album belongs in there.
Right.
Other than the drumming thing, I'm thinking it's right in there.
See, we're going to amend that tonight, right? That's the whole idea. That's why we're talking about it. So for you, it's a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm someone that came to them after the 80s fame and got clued into there was a past and all that. And like you said, it's underappreciated. So people were like pointing me towards the run and saying I didn't have to worry about that. And I'm regretting it now because to me, I mean, I can't say I like anything decidedly more than this one. I like this quite a bit. I got the original OG mix at first, and then I didn't like it. It's murky. It's a little feeble. So I got the 07, and it indeed does. Now I don't have any quibbles with it at all. It sounds really good.
So, Mr. Guitar, Eric,
Yes.
what do you think of Anthony Phillips versus Steve Hackett? And, you know, having heard them both playing, you know, some of this material.
I love the 12 string. I mean, I think it's beautiful. I mean, this record, I guess for me, what I hear, I do think Hackett is a better lead player, without question. But I think the use of the acoustic guitars with Phillips and Rutherford this is gorgeous. And like you said, it kind of sets the stage because I think even going to George's point, what I did when I listened to this, because this was another one, I pulled this off the shelf. I've got and Ken, I have the coveted MCA edition.
Oh, they covered
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
But when I pulled this off the shelf, I had, you know, and like you guys were saying, I kind of a nursery crime through Wind and Wuthering, and this one I had not listened to in a while. But to George's point, when I put on this, I said, well, I'm going to go listen to Nursery Crime. And immediately Collins, to me, makes a huge difference. I do think the songwriting is a little better in the sense, and maybe not better is the wrong word, because I went back and read the Gallo book, like you were saying. And I do think from listening to Trespass and then going to Nursery Crime, they took, I think there's a quote in the book where they were saying when they went out and did live shows, they noticed how the fan reaction was bigger as the songs got more aggressive.
Yeah.
And I think with Nursery Crime, you get something like Musical Box, which kicks it off. As good as The Knife is, having Collins and Hackett on the Musical Box, I think takes them from here to here.
Mhm.
And obviously, I think Steve took, you know, and I'm sure with working with Rutherford, he definitely has some Anthony Phillips influence. I mean, they continue to use those sounds. You listen to Dusk and I almost hear stuff from Supper's Ready.
Entangled.
You know,
And some of these tunes, it would have been nice if they would have resurrected them. You know?
yeah, it'd be interesting. But I just think the song, you know, and it does make sense as the bands progress, the songwriting got better. But I think a lot of the elements that were in Trespass continued to get used. And to me, that shows that it is something where maybe it's an album people did bypass, but I think going along with George, it's one that definitely needs to be listened to. It just makes sense. You know, you're going to progress, you're going to get better. I do think it was interesting how, again, when I went back and read the Gallo book, that they hold themselves up for that 6-month period and even themselves talking about how much better they became as players, and then they went out and did the live shows. And I think there's even a quote in there that when Ant quit, a couple of them were like, uh-oh, like almost thinking like, are we going to continue?
They played a few shows without a guitarist.
Yep.
If I remember. And then
They
they
did
had
have somebody. They had some guy, right?
Then there was a guy named Mick Barnard,
Yes.
who was he was going to be the replacement, and he didn't work out. And I don't know if any live tapes have ever turned up with Mick Barnard.
Yeah, I don't know, but
I don't know if anything ever happened to Mick Barnard.
But he became I think he had something to do with electronics. Like there's something that he worked on. He was a pioneer of something. He was a kineticist, I think. I know he wound up doing very well for himself.
I think he installed car stereos.
8-track players.
Yeah, something like that, right? Yeah. So Eric, where do you put this in the canon?
I mean, for me, I'm a Hackett guy, so it's going to go below the Hackett stuff. But I think you don't get Nursery Crime or Foxtrot without Trespass, and you hear the influence of this record right through. You know, like I think Chuck, did you even mention Entangled? I mean, that acoustic part of them continued on for many years. So it's definitely an important step. And I just think the songwriting got better and Collins and Hackett elevated them. But I guess I would put it sixth, because I'm gonna go Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, The Lamb. I gotta go with the essentials, and then I'll go back to Trespass, I guess, at that point, after you get through Wind.
So Chuck, it's a big step up from Genesis to Revelation, huh?
A very big step. Although I do like their debut album. So, but it's rather immature. Immature, but mature at the same time. No,
That's
it's
fucking love right there, brother.
It's like an album done by a bunch of Boy Scouts. So now Trespass, me being a huge Genesis fan that I am, I remember this was the second prog album that I ever purchased from Genesis. The first purchase was Seconds Out, and then it was Trespass. And from the beginning of from the first time that I heard Looking for Someone, I was hooked, man. It's one of those albums that from the first listen, I loved everything on this album. Whether or not it's on par with musically, with anything on Nursery Crime, it's still pretty good album. Like I said, but this is where the roots of Genesis, the prog period, really began. And Looking for Someone is a beautiful song. Then you have White Mountain. White Mountain's a lovely song. The song that I always have a problem with is Visions of Angels. I never was really too crazy about that song, but it's still a good song.
Yeah.
But my favorite song on the album, forgive me. The best song on the album, in my opinion, is Stagnation. I think that Stagnation is a fantastic tune. It's one of the few songs on the album where it actually developed very well. And my favorite song on the album is Dusk. It's always has been. It's one of my top 10 Genesis songs. I think it's a beautiful, lovely song. You get to hear the influences of the Moody Blues, and what's on there, and sometimes a little bit of Procol Harum as well. And then you have The Lovely Knife. The Knife is a fantastic song, but Steve and Phil, they just elevate that song to like metal type proportions there. But overall, when it comes to Trespass, I would say that Trespass top 10. I've always loved the album. I never hated any single song on there. Although once again, I believe that Visions of Angels is probably the probably one of the it's an okay song, but it's not a bad song. But then I also think about songs like Pasadena that could have also been on there. Let Us Make Love, Going Out to Get You.
Were those from Trespass sessions?
Yes, no, actually the thing is they developed most of them on there because that Twilight Ale House actually was from their debut album.
Was it leftover?
Well, there's the beginning part. There's a part right after the beginning of it where you actually hear the stages of the song Twilight Ale House on there.
Can you sing it for us?
No, right before that, but you do you really want to hear that?
Sure, why not? What the hell? I got time. I got plenty of time. Go for it, man.
Cut people off.
That's right. I'm cutting people off, but I want Chuck to sing tonight.
Oh man. But yeah, so they said that they had all these songs that they developed. One of the songs that I would have loved to have seen them develop was Pasadena, which they played on the BBC gig that they had. Also, like mentioned, Going Out to Get You, which they actually would go and actually record on the Foxtrot sessions. Matter of fact, Foxtrot was another album that was actually very fruitful because a lot of that stuff wound up on Anthony's favorite album, Voyage of the Acolyte, was developed on there. But getting back to
Shout out Hierophant came from the Foxtrot sessions.
Yes, it did. But getting back to Trespass, man, yes, it's a fantastic album, a top 10 for me. One of Genesis' best albums, although I think that John Mayhew was pretty much timid in his drumming.
So you rank it higher than Invisible Touch?
Oh, most definitely.
Doc, is Shepard from the Trespass sessions?
Actually, it's
I think
before
that's
it.
earlier.
It's before it.
That
Mhm,
song is fantastic.
mhm. Shepherd is before it. It's
From the Bee Gees sessions.
yes. Mhm. But although
The
that
Bee Gees sessions?
That album, the Genesis Revelation, sounds like a Bee Gees record. If you listen to it, it sounds like a Bee
It
Gees.
is a Bee Gees
It
record
is.
Yeah, pretty much.
without any
That's what was
funk
popular
or
back then.
disco. It's bullshit.
Yeah, that's what was popular.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's why it's such a big seller.
No, it's not.
Like Son of Sombra.
Exactly. We are not popular. We aim to piss you off. Mission accomplished.
Wait, so is that's what John Anderson's been doing all these years?
Wow.
Here we go.
Oh, he's pissed me off
Now it starts. Let's
with his
Now we-
crooning. and
now we just got to
serenading his
throw
fucking
Roger Waters and
wife.
Kiss into the mix. We'll be here all night.
You guys need your own spin-off.
I just need to have a sit down with John Anderson and just make fun of Anthony. That's what I need to do.
So I don't want to cut anybody off. So if you know if you guys if you have more to say, you know,
I'm
chime in.
good, man. But thank you very much, Ken. Mhm.
No, I no. Chuck's the expert when it comes to Genesis. He knows his shit. Man.
Oh yeah.
Anthony, stop shaking your head. Talk to me about Trespass. Tell me.
I love it. The funny thing about Trespass is for years before I was really kind of into the Gabriel years, I used to always see Kmart used to have like a $3.99 cassette bin. They used to have loads of Trespass on cassette.
Right.
It would always say 1974, and I'd be like, well, that's when the Lamb came out. So I was always kind of confused about that. But I had seen that for years, and then I really didn't get into the Gabriel era till I had Send New England by the Pound, loved it, but just never explored further. Then sometime in the mid 90s, I started to, and then I worked my way back. And that's when I discovered Anthony Phillips. And as Eric was saying, Hackett's here and Phillips is here, but Phillips is still, I think, a very good guitar player, more acoustic, more pastoral. They both went to Chris Squire's wedding together. They're still good friends. They hang out.
Did they record something together?
2 songs.
Yeah,
I
on
think
what? Like
recently he's played on maybe a couple of, I think he's played on a couple of tunes on Hackett's albums recently. Pete, you might remember that or know that. We
Yeah,
never
I don't
discussed that in
remember
our
which
Hackett ranking.
I don't remember.
But,
which one, so.
But as I was saying, I went back and originally I thought maybe it was more of a Phillips record, but as I go back, it's more of a Tony Banks record because the organ's prominent in every tune. I mean, it kind of knocks your socks off. And I think Peter is a beast on the vocals. The knife kind of is like a precursor to giving them confidence to write Hogweed, kind of like the same crunchy guitar, kind of heavy type tune for that time period. White Mountain's my favorite tune. I have a couple of recordings from the 76 era, and them playing that tune is just awesome. So yeah, I give it a huge thumbs up. I love it. And I love the cover too. I'd love to have a shirt of this, but they've never made one, I don't think.
Not that I've
this
seen.
is what Paul Whitehead.
Yeah.
Mhm. His first.
I hate the cover actually.
Really?
Sorry, I don't
I
like
think it's
it.
cool.
Oh, I love it.
Why?
I don't know.
Have you? I think if you
like
look
it
at the
'cause you
cover as
hate
it's
it, Louise.
intended,
That's why I love it.
I actually like it.
Oh,
Fuck
okay.
you.
Here.
Well, the
I-
cover
I,
itself tells a story.
Well,
They
if
Yeah.
want
Louise,
this like real pastoral sort of
I like
lovey-dovey
that. I like the
image,
fact that
and
it's
then
like
they put
a
the knife
picture
through it.
and a photo. It's great. Yeah, I love it.
yeah.
Not
It
with you.
basically tells you you're going to hear this nice album, and then the knife's going to be track 6 and take your head off.
Mhm,
Yeah, Ken, White
And
Mountain's
that's
my
a tribute
favorite
to
track
Keith
on the
Emerson.
record.
mhm,
White Mountain is a good tune,
I love it.
mhm.
and yeah,
It's a fantastic tune, man.
I didn't see them on the '76 tour, and if I did, I would have said, "What the hell is this song? I don't know this song." Because for me, I started listening to them in '76. I started with Trick of the Tail, so the Gabriel era, you know, I had to work my way backwards. And by the time I got to Trespass, I was like, "What the hell is this?" So, well, but I mean, I like, as I said, I like the album very much. So, I'm going to say Pete for last. Make him feel. I'm going to make him feel at home.
That's okay.
You need to know this. I'm gonna go to Chad. Chad, talk to me. Tell
Well,
me about your love for this record.
all right. You know, it's a very good album. I don't know if I would use love on it, but I do like the album. It's really one hell of a transition from that first album to where they were going. You really hear Pete's confidence. Like Anthony was saying, you hear Tony Banks bringing in the organ. Interestingly enough, I pulled out one of the Genesis books I have, and apparently Tony Banks was reluctant to buy an organ. They kind of had to talk him into it.
Yep.
Which was interesting. But obviously he learned how to use it because it's all over this album and he does some great stuff. Obviously for me, The Knife is number one, but I think Looking for Someone and Stagnation are both solid tunes. One thing I thought as I was listening to it, to bone up for this, Dusk, which, sorry, Chuck, it's my least favorite on the album. I think it actually sounds the most like the first album. There's no drums on it. It's very, lots of 12 strings. It's pretty soft. But one thing I noticed, if you listen to the choruses or when they're all
Tony
singing together,
Banks.
you can hear Tony Banks.
Yep.
And like very prominently. And I don't think you ever hear him quite like that again. He just blends, he's more blended in. What song was it? Oh, White Mountain, which you guys have already talked at length. We always saw those old photos and videos of Peter Gabriel with his beloved bass drum. Well, he pounds the shit out of that on White Mountain. You could really hear that on that one. But yeah, it's really you can see that it almost seemed like they couldn't wait to get away from Jonathan King and trying to write singles for other people and some of those more twee songs, the Bee Gees-ish stuff that was going on at the time, and be more adventurous. So they went out to that Christmas cottage, which didn't belong to Anthony Phillips' parents. It was Richard McPhail, their early manager.
Yes.
They were up there for 6 months working on songs, and apparently Anthony Phillips was sort of the dictator there, and he made them work 7 hours a day. So they didn't get breaks. They didn't see their girlfriends. They didn't, nothing. They barely left. They made just enough money on gigs here and there to eat. So all they did was play and write and hone their skills and fight a little bit.
Good stuff.
And all this stuff came out of it. The one thing that hasn't been talked about is those Jackson tapes, those 4 songs for the soundtrack for a guy named Mick Jackson. And some of this stuff came out of there, like bits of Stagnation, or not Stagnation, I'm sorry, Looking for Someone. But then you'll hear a little Fountain of Salmassus. You hear Anyway from The Land. You hear a little bit of the Musical Box. So a lot of that stuff starting to churn. And once they got focused in writing the material for Trespass, it's really a hell of a jump from that first album. You can tell that they really wanted to get innovative and start doing different things. And apparently Jonathan King heard what they were working on and hated it. He wanted nothing to do with it. So quickly, and I think, I don't think it was a bad breakup. I think they were both very happy to part ways, and the Genesis guys went and did what they wanted to do, and that was to make more adventurous music, and that really comes through on Trespass, especially with Stagnation. It starts off, more like that romantic thing that we're going to learn from Genesis later on, with a relatively aggressive middle section, which is great. And it comes and softens back up and has a great outro. And then of course The Knife. The Knife is the calling card from this album. It all builds up, and then you hit the knife. You're like, whoa, there they are. There's the coming of age. That's where Genesis is going. And for that reason, it's a very interesting album to listen to because it's so transformational. To see where they were. Really, it's like if that debut album's here, this is a hell of a ramp up. They jumped again when they got Phil and Steve for sure, but just from that first to second album on their own, getting rid of that Jonathan King baggage, they got to do what they wanted to do, and it really showed their ingenuity. Tony is the best player.
Yes, by far.
Mike Rutherford would tell you that he wasn't a great bass player or guitar player at the time. Anthony Phillips contributed a lot of ideas. I think the Visions of Angels was actually mostly his, and it was a leftover from the first album that they didn't develop until Trespass. And again, like I think some of you guys are saying, it's an okay song. You know, it's got a relatively memorable chorus, but it's kind of predictable and it's okay. And it's not something they did again, really quite like that. But I think it's a solid album. I would rank it probably similar to the way Eric did. I mean, the Steve albums definitely have to all rank above this. But it's a great album, and like for historical purposes, it kind of gives it a little extra elevation for me. I like going back and hearing their true beginnings, shall I say, their true progressive, innovative beginnings. It's really pretty cool to hear.
So let's take Steve out of the equation, Chad. Who wins? Which album wins? Trespass or And Then There Were Three?
You know what? I was going to ask you the same thing, you son of a bitch.
And it's great as I just thought of it right now. So,
You know what? I think there's enough. I'll use the word cheese on And Then There Were Three that this just beats it. I think
Hey,
there's some
see,
stuff
I think
on-
Rutherford's tone on And Then There Were Three is amazing, and I don't think he ever sounded like that
I'm talking.
again.
I'm not talking about tones and recordings and all
I'm
that.
talking about songs.
Oh, I think it's a great record. Except for the last track, I think it's a great
Yeah, I
record.
like And Then There Were Three. Don't get me wrong. I like most of it. There's some things that are like, you know, maybe that wasn't the best idea. Let's not sing about snowmen. Not a bad song, but you know.
Took me a
Louis
while.
loves that.
Took me a while.
There's some lip-wristed shit on that album.
Say It's All Right, Joe. I mean, there's a couple songs there I could throw out that would maybe equal the playing field.
Right.
I would give Trespass a slight nod in that respect.
So, Luis, if Anthony Phillips had stayed in the band, do you see that? What direction do you see them going in?
I don't know, man, because
How much of an influence was Steve?
I think look, the easiest way to answer that question is if you listen, although that also includes Phil Collins, but if you listen to the Knife on Genesis Live and you listen to the Knife on the record, the one on the record sounds almost laughable. I mean, seriously, this is a very unpopular opinion among guitarists, but a band is only as good as the fucking drummer. It's as simple as that. Okay. And the drummer, this guy Mayhew, I read up on him because I at first, I remember when I first heard that record, I thought, man, Phil Collins was probably high or some drugs or something. He wasn't really, doesn't sound like him at all. And then I realized it wasn't him. So that explained a lot. It was some other guy. I'm obviously not a Genesis aficionado like you guys, but I when you hear that version live, the guitar tone is one thing. Hackett destroys everything. They suddenly discovered that their scrotum have something other than lint, and that's good. But on top of that, they actually play it with such intensity, but also joy, right? Like that's a song that's a protest about war, about the meaninglessness of war, right? And they fucking kill it, right? Live. I mean, hear the record, it stands out from stuff like Vision of Angels, which is not really my jam at all, but you can certainly realize that this is a great song. But so where would they go without Hackett? I don't think they would have acquired the same height. I think they needed that brain, even though it was very highly and clinically suppressed by Tony Banks. I think they needed Hackett in order to get to where they got. Because if you hear the way that I hear it, you guys got to remember, I'm a metal guy first and foremost, right? So I listen to things through that lens. I love prog, and I discovered that I love this record actually, with the exception of Vision of Angels. I like every other tune, and I love the lyrics. I have nothing bad to say about the lyrics. I think the lyrics are actually quite good across the board. The only minus that I would say is that the guitars are even more Myung'd than John Myung is in Dream Theater. It's there's a lot of strummies and things, but really it's the Tony Banks show, right?
Yep.
Well, and Tony always played a lot of 12 string, even live.
Well, but I'm sure that the loudest 12 string you ever heard in Genesis was played by Tony Banks. and that is the thing. It's like, this is what I mean. So I think that a lot of the idea of meshing these two 12-string guitars is beautiful. And it has a lot in common with like even Cuban folk music and other forms of very acoustic guitar-driven stuff. It's beautiful stuff. I love it. I think Anthony Phillips was a guy that liked really pretty stuff, but I don't think he's a guy who understood that progressive rock needs to fucking rock.
Yep.
He never did anything.
So I just find it very, very. I mean, Anthony uses the word pastoral, or however you say it in English. To me, that's a euphemism for limp. It's just like, it's pretty. It's like, there's little flowers. There's a fucking gnome peeking at you, blows you a kiss, and he goes back. It's not rock, okay? It doesn't do shit for me. So whereas when I hear, especially lately, when you go hear Steve Hackett play all those old Genesis songs, man, they're so good, right?
Yep.
And let me just say one thing about this record, because I did take notes. I really liked it, and I hadn't heard it in many, many years. So I actually sat down and I transcribed things and I did my homework, right? And I think that a lot of people who say that this is not as good as the others are missing the mark on what makes Genesis great from my perspective. To me, Genesis is great as songwriters more than players, right? The songwriting is what makes the stuff elevate. If you look at, I mean, let me just quickly go through this. I'm not going to bore everybody, but if you go through Looking for Someone, right? Okay.
Looking for someone.
Or in this case, Looking for Gabriel. That one, right?
Now together.
If you listen to the first verse, right? Just the first verse, okay? I'm going to read out to you the chords. It's a G sharp minor, G sharp minor 6, G sharp minor 7th to a B major, F sharp major, G sharp minor to G sharp major. Okay? This is a song that has in total 24 fucking chords.
Mm-hmm.
All right? It is not a 3-chord pop nothing. Mm-hmm. Right? And that is the thing and that cadence that I just read out is very, very smart. There's nothing fucking, stock about it. It's not, this is the genius of Genesis, in my opinion. The songwriting, the way they string their harmonies, and I don't mean harmonies, vocal people singing together. I mean, the chordal harmony of the songs is amazing. And then on top of that, like Ken correctly pointed out, you have these stories. I think White Mountain stands out to me because it's like an epic without having to be 30 minutes long. It's this battle between, Fang and One Eye, and it turns out that Fang is really an asshole, and One Eye, who kills him, he's like the hero. It's kind of interesting, right? Like and the sound of the music, again, the choices, the sound design, everything about it is it just sounds like fucking, if Ice had a voice, that's what it would be. No disrespect to Camel and Andy Latimer, but this is the sound of winter to me. I love it. I think the way they use harmony to tell the story is really unique to Genesis, and it allows Peter Gabriel to then be an actor. It's almost like going to he's a great singer, but there's a beauty to the way that they set the stage for him. And then he can put on his costumes or whatever the fuck he did. It's all good. But it makes sense because the music is happening, right? All these costumes are stupid if the music is bad. But the music is fantastic throughout this record, right? Even Dusk, which I know Chatsky didn't particularly care for, I like the fact that it is a pretty, no, it's fine. But what I mean is it is soft. It's a softie, right? But what I like about it is that the lyrics are about unrequited love. There's like a deep mystery that goes with this happy music. I love that juxtaposition. So there's always something you can latch onto that with the exception of Vision of Angels, because that's just corny. To me, that's just meh, right? Doesn't really do much for me. But the rest of the record, I think, is great. And the knife, the proof's in the pudding. When you had more capable musicians in a rock sense, it explodes, right? I to this day, I still don't understand why the fuck they don't play that song in every show.
Well,
Like
I
that,
think that used to be wasn't that the encore? Wasn't
That
it?
was up until I think the 75 or 76, right?
Yeah, but why didn't they play it in 2000 whenever? Just fucking kick some ass, dude.
Yeah,
Especially now they have
I agree.
Collins on drums. Yeah, let the kid play. Let these guys do. I mean, Daryl could have played the shit out of that song, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah,
Lady.
I
He would have
looking
made
for,
if Daryl played it, he would have made it sound like a Jean-Luc Ponty tune. But
well, maybe, but I have to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Well,
Call me a softie.
Luis, the answer to your question is Tony Banks said so. That's why
I
they
know.
don't play.
I understand.
so is Tony
Banks
Banks?
is quite the.
Is Tony Banks? Does he rule Genesis with an iron fist? Yes or no?
Yes.
He definitely.
He didn't. The Lamb, he didn't. And that's what pissed him off.
Well, the Lamb, I thought, was those
That's all
guys writing,
Gabriel.
and then Gabriel trying to fit his lead. That was where they were always like, the four of us are writing, Pete's not here, and then Pete comes in and sings over all our stuff.
But also, Lamb, look how buried the fucking guitar is, and he's playing some killer lines.
Well, he definitely didn't like Hackett at some point because
So it's
He's
like,
threatened.
how does a keyboard player get away with that shit? It's like you have the Marshall stacked right next to you. It's like, fuck you, Tony. Watch me play. And I'm gonna kill you with this fucking fuss box and my Marshall, and you can eat my
Lewis,
shit.
they needed Richie Blackmore in the band. Then you wouldn't have heard a peep out of Tony.
Richie Blackmore would have eaten Tony Banks alive.
He would have beat him senseless with the Strat.
Yeah, no, he had no chance there. But in all seriousness, though, Tony Banks to me is a difficult character because the songwriting and the talent that he brings in that regard is so high.
Yeah.
But he is such an undeniable twat, such an unpleasant asshole to deal with, right?
Mhm.
That it's like, it's a struggle for me.
And it's amazing that it continues to today.
Yeah, and the guy has the balls to say, because I did some reading on this record, that he just didn't think the material was that strong. Like, fuck you, dude. It sounds just like the stuff you liked. It's just that it was played by an inferior drummer, a guy who was a carpenter, right?
Mhm.
Who did this kind of half-assed. And I also read, and you Genesis historians can correct me if I'm wrong about this. I read somewhere that when they were first negotiating their deal, they were offered like 15 pounds a week, and Mayhew said 10 pounds a week was just fine.
Wow.
Because he was one of these like working class guys. Right? It just seemed like a lot to him. Like, no, 10 is fine. And they're like, what the fuck, dude, shut the fuck up. But it was too late. Right? So, he didn't really mesh with the dudes, not only personality wise. I think that it seems to me like the Genesis guys seem to me to be like high class English people, like a little posh.
Yeah.
Whereas Mayhew was not that. Right.
Yeah.
So there is that. So there's many.
plus they kind of grew up together, right? So
Yeah, they're all
Tony
discreet.
Banks
Well,
would be an outsider.
So the you can hear that. You can hear that it's a mismatch. I think that George is being too kind. I think that George would have kicked this song's asses. I mean, it's just he doesn't really do them justice. From my perspective, I think that's a very big weakness of the record. But if you just judge the compositions, I think they're really very, very good. I don't have anything bad to say. Even Visions of Angels, I was very careful to say I don't think it sucks.
No,
It's just not my jam.
thank
Not
you.
for me, right?
Well, Luis, that was why I went back quick and listened to Nursery Crime after I'd listened to this a couple times. You didn't even have to go past Musical Box, and you're like, there's no comparison between Collins and Mayhew. Nothing.
No,
Mm-mm.
and it's so immense the difference, right?
It is.
That
not to go off on a tangent, but isn't it interesting that those two guys joined the band and Collins became not just because of the vocals, but overall he became like a leader of the band. You know, he usurped some of the power from Banks.
Yeah.
And for Hackett, that never really happened. You know, it was always a struggle for him to get his tunes. You know, and
But one thing that Hackett did do was that he was the one that instigated Tony getting a Mellotron.
That's right. That's true.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Sure.
Mhm.
And,
Well, you
and
know-
thinking of all the power struggles that went on, it's amazing that Steve Hackett got an acoustic tune on Foxtrot. I mean, if you go back and think about that, how did Tony allow that?
Well, I think that was probably early enough that they weren't quite butting heads that hard yet.
Mhm.
I mean, band dynamics are always complicated. You know, they're always complicated. But I think this record is really very unfairly maligned.
is it maligned or just
No,
ignored?
I don't think it's just
I think
ignored.
ignored. I don't
would
think
say
Well,
ignored.
I'll say
ignored too.
this. I was told by Genesis people to not bother with it, kind of like George was told. And the only reason I bought it is because I saw the music box play and they played the knife.
Mhm.
And then I asked these guys, in which Genesis record is the fucking knife? And they said Trespass. Well, why the fuck did you tell me that from the beginning? I want to hear this. So that's how I bought that record. And you know, it's just a great album.
Well,
Start
and
to
this
end.
comes back to why I picked this album, because we don't talk about it. It doesn't get I don't think it gets the respect it deserves.
I agree with you there. I was given that disrespect by people who supposedly knew better,
Mhm.
and I very stupidly believed them, right? Until I got a chance to hear and realize these guys are semi-retarded, and they're not really listening to this. They're listening with their heart and their love for a guy, not the actual tunes, right? The tunes are great.
All right, Louis, you spoke enough.
I will now shut up.
Cut him off.
Yeah, don't cut him off, Ken.
Mr. Pardo, is this album, is this the table setter?
Oh, for
Or-
sure. Yeah, 100%. I am still amazed to this day when you listen to From Genesis to Revelation and you listen to this. Is it even the same band?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
the growth in songwriting and playing ability is just it's off the charts. How different it is, and how much this is totally in my wheelhouse. And that first album is like, if I listen to that once every 15 years, that's probably a lot. I mean, my guess is these guys were all hanging out together, maybe smoking a joint or whatever, and they listened to the Court of the Crimson King in the Wake of the Poseidon, and they're like, oh shit, we got to do something like that, right? Because how else do you go from that first album to this? I mean, there's such a gap in them becoming Genesis. I mean, it's just happened overnight. But yeah, I mean, I want to touch on a couple things. So we talked a lot about Anthony Phillips and Steve Hackett. My impression, been listening to this. I've heard this album so much in my life, and I gotta say, the remix or remaster, whatever they did to this in 2007, 2008, it's a completely different album, because the original is so murky and just so like kind of flat sounding. But what's really interesting is to kind of dissect this album and really listen to Anthony Phillips, because when we know Genesis, especially longtime fans, we center on Steve Hackett and his contributions to the band and what he brings to the table. And you listen to this album, and especially for me, like the electric guitar parts, I don't think that Anthony Phillips was ever all that uncomfortable playing aggressive electric guitar music. I've always gotten, I mean, if you listen to most of his solo albums, he's a great acoustic player, classical player, right? And there's plenty of that on here too. But I get the impression that, like, especially during like Looking for Someone in the Knife, that and it's not bad, but it sounds a little like he's out of his wheelhouse when he's cranking up the fuzz or whatever and trying to play this aggressive stuff. And especially, Lewis brought it up, when you listen to The Knife from the live album and you hear Hackett doing all this stuff, you're like, all right, it all clicks right there, right? Not that the knife on here is terrible, because it isn't. It's great. But that's like, to me, that's a minor quibble. It's just, I think it's a guy who's out of his comfort zone a little bit, where the band is wanting to add more rock to their sound. And obviously, as we know, he left the band and he went and did lots of, acoustic stuff and classical stuff.
Do you think that part of the reason why he left, I know he talks about stage fright and all, you think that part of the reason why he left was because the direction that the band was going was heavier? The knife was the future.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, they were moving towards very dramatic music and symphonic music and heavier music and very keyboard dominated music. And I think this is a guy who was very much, he's just comfortable in his own skin, playing stuff that he likes. I'd rather, the big crowds probably scared him, and he just wanted to kind of withdraw a little bit. And that's when I listen to Anthony Phillips' music, that's the kind of impression I get, is he's probably a very shy guy, quiet guy. He's, obviously very skilled musically, and he's created some great music in his solo career. But to me, he doesn't seem like the kind of a band guy, right? Playing in a band that's going to play this very dramatic music. And he's just not that guy. And I'm not saying that like Hackett back in the 70s was, Hackett used to sit on stage with his glasses on a little stool, and he wasn't that guy either, to an extent. But I don't think that Phillips was it at all. So I think for him, after this album, he's kind of like, yeah, this is really not my cup of tea. And I think it worked out for the best for everybody, obviously. But I would say I'm doing this series on the channel this month and into next month about those great like 6 album runs. Classic bands who have like 6, really, really strong albums in a row. I have a really hard time with Genesis, because it's like, I kind of want to start here because I think it deserves to start here, that run. But then you have to end it at Trick of the Tail, and then you can't include Wind and Wuthering, right? So it's like, where does it start and end? Or do you just say it's a great 7 album run, an 8 album run if you want to include, and then there were 3, you want to include Duke as well? I think it's a real strong succession of albums from this band, no matter how much you look at it after that first album. Where you want to end it, you can end it with Genesis or Abacab or whatnot. But this is tremendous. And I think Tony Banks is the star of the show here. His organ work is tremendous. There's some nice piano on here. And I don't know, because I definitely heard that he bought a Mellotron a little later on, but there's Mellotron in a couple spots in this album. So maybe it was in the studio, wherever they were recording it, and he was able to use it. But and Gabriel becomes Peter Gabriel on this album. I think that's the important thing. He really, all of a sudden, he's the guy here. And the theatricality of his performance is fully on display here. And quite frankly,
I was going to say they went to Italy, toured in Italy. They saw the singer from Osana wearing a mask, and Peter said, "What a fucking great idea!
I can do that.
I'm going to steal that. Holy shit! I'm going to do that."
Yeah. But his favorite tracks on, Stagnation is just amazing.
That's a great song.
I want to drink.
Great.
I want to drink. It's just so great. It's so iconic. The Knife is great. I really like Looking for Someone. Dusk is gorgeous. I don't mind Visions of Angels, and White Mountain is just terrific. This is a really strong album. Is it quite Nursery Crime or Foxtrot for me? Not quite, but it's damn good. Damn good.
Here's a question for you. So some of the some of the songs on here aren't our favorites. We've all talked The Knife and Stagnation, Looking for Someone. We know that Twilight Ale House was written and performed around this time in 1970. Why do you think they didn't include that on here?
Which it wasn't developed yet. They didn't develop it until Steve Hackett really took over, because they were still playing just folk parts of it. In 69 and early 70. But once Steve Hackett came along, that's when they developed the song into what was recorded during the Foxtrot sessions.
All right, fair enough.
They were saying, one of the things I remember reading the Armando Gallo book the other day was they're saying that at one point they used to do like a 19-minute version of The Knife.
Yep.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to hear.
Same with Going Out to Get You was about the same length.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Genesis aficionados and know-it-alls. When you get to talking about stagnation after the I want to drink section, right? Which to my mind, it really misses the power of Collins and Hackett to really be even better. There's a flute melody that happens after that.
Mhm.
That flute melody is textbook Genesis, right? They almost sort of quote that idea in several of their other songs, right?
Yeah, there's some good.
So really
looking for someone too.
Yeah, that blueprint of Genesis is really clear in this record. Right?
There's a lot of stuff that, in Trespass,
Yeah.
which you hear sections which remind you of something from
Yeah.
The Lamb or something from Nursery Crime.
It's
I mentioned Dusk, because Dusk I hear like Supper's Ready sometimes when I'm listening to Dusk. I'll hear those acoustic pieces.
Get out of there.
There is a lot that, and you can just tell that kind of carried on, into at least the early day, maybe still the Gabriel era, more so than when Collins went out front.
Pete, I don't want to get thrown off the show. Did I cut you off?
No. That cut me off. No, just kidding.
I had read a few years ago that Dave Matthews said that this was his favorite Genesis album. To the point where he actually wanted to cover Dusk. Thank God he never did it.
Maybe it would have been cool.
I'm just shocked he's even a fan. Wow.
No, he loves the album. Loves it very much.
Like hearing him sing. I don't want to hear him sing a Genesis.
Yeah, I can't hear him singing
Yeah.
Gabriel, but
And the thing with Anthony Phillips is, like you listen to Geese and the Ghost, right? His first solo album. I think it's clear that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And really when he started to do like poppier stuff, like Wise After the Event, to me that he was way out of his element. That stuff was really to me was kind of half-assed. He was great as a playing acoustic music, 12-string. I mean, I like Geese and the Ghost. I like that album. I think it's a nice, nice record.
Yeah, and Ken, Wise After the Event, Michael Giles plays on that record.
Yeah, he may play on it, but it's still a sucky album.
Oh, I like it. You're just
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like,
but
you know,
you like every sucky album ever made, Anthony.
yeah. I mean, it's just, it's like, man, stay in your lane. You're not a pop, you're not good at doing pop music. Don't make a pop album.
What?
That's my feeling. Go play to your strengths. Geese and the Ghost played to his strength. He played really nice acoustic based music. He had Phil Collins singing,
Yeah.
right? Rutherford, if I remember correctly, is on. And, he had all his buddies playing on there. It's kind of obviously a very different type of an album. It's even softer than Trespass. But if you stand back and look at it and listen to it, I think it's quite a beautiful record.
oh yeah.
I think it's not something I reach for often, probably once a decade, but but I think it's I think
And the
that's
cover art kind of gives you a feeling what the record's going to sound like.
Oh, for
Well,
sure.
the covers are all amazing.
What's
his
interesting
covers.
is that I have an English pressing and I have the US pressing, and they were both mastered by two different people. All right, maybe that's not so interesting, but it's amazing.
That's like,
Somebody in the comments is gonna say, "Wow, that's fucking interesting."
yeah.
You're cutting
And
them
it'll
off
be-
again.
And it's gonna be you.
Yeah, they're gonna say after Ken cut everybody off, you made a good point.
Ken, I'm surprised you haven't linked the Keith Emerson thing to this yet.
Which Keith Emerson?
That the knife was actually originally called The Nice as a tribute to
Yeah,
Keith Emerson.
oh,
because
yeah,
Banks
right.
and Gabriel loved him.
Yeah,
And that's then they changed it to the knife. And
You
then
know-
they used the knife imagery on the cover because Keith used to, stab his Hammond.
when if I remember correctly, the ads for I think it was Nursery Crime. I'm sure
Nursery
Chuck's
Crime.
gonna know the answer.
Nursery crime.
That the ads that Keith, there was a quote from Keith Emerson about Genesis. He was a fan.
Wasn't Pete Townsend or was it John Lennon a fan of Settling England?
I think.
Lennon.
I
John
think.
Lennon.
I think it was Lennon.
I think it was John Lennon.
John Lennon.
Imagine. Oh, look what I just did.
There you go.
Oh,
I just did.
Jesus.
Nice.
Oh,
So it looks like we got thumbs up all around for this album.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is
Oh,
cool.
Pete's cutting us off.
No, I'm just,
Hey, one thing I wanted to say that I didn't get a chance to say that everybody says I like sucky things. I think the intro piano is a beautiful melody on Visions of Angels. I've always liked that.
It's not bad, man. It's not bad.
No.
It just like I said, Visions of Angels. I don't think there's a single bad song on this record. They're not bad, none of them. I just don't particularly care for that song. It's a little too soft for me, but it's not really committed to the softness like Dusk.
Actually, the thing about Visions of Angels, I said I like the song, but to me, that's where John Mayhew's drumming is at its worst,
Yes.
in my opinion. I think it's atrocious on there. I just feel that he rushes. It just lacks any creativity on there. So that's a song where his drumming really bothers me.
It's like Mick Pointer in the first Marillion album.
Oh man, makes me want
Makes
to
it
cry, man.
unlistenable.
I love the arena guys.
Mhm.
But let's just be real here.
Yeah, Mick
So
Pointer-
yeah, so I just have to say that. I think you're right. It's not, when the drumming is not great, it really is not great.
Mhm. And on that song, that's really it makes me want to skip the song, and it's a shame because I like the song, but it's the drumming that bothers me on that song. Mhm.
So,
It sounded like they really liked Chris Silver, but then he decided to go off to university.
No,
They were
it's
even hoping maybe he'd come back, but that just never happened.
Nope, became a writer. Mhm.
Yep.
sometimes things work out for the best.
Chris Stewart.
you guys were talking about how they had this. What's the name of the guy that wanted them to write Bee Gees songs?
Jonathan
Tony
King.
Stratton Smith
Jonathan
no, not
King.
Tony Stratton.
Jonathan King.
Jonathan King.
or Jonathan King.
It's probably a good thing that Phil Collins wasn't in the band with that guy, because the only guy who ever came close to that was Phil Collins, right?
Yeah, did you ever hear Flaming Youth?
No.
That
No.
was
His band,
that was
Phil
Phil's
Band.
band. Yeah, I remember when the CD came out, I put it in my catalog. I said should have been called Flaming Shit.
Yeah.
I heard it
Yeah.
once, not very good.
No.
No, it's not particularly good.
Ken, your favorite band, Kiss, has a Flaming Youth song also.
Oh, did it?
Destroyer.
Yeah.
It's actually a cool tune, I think.
Yeah, there's
A lot
nothing.
of good Kiss.
Kids
tunes.
did it's cool. But, nothing.
There's,
But thank you for giving me the little momentary the opportunity. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
We have to find a way to get a KISS statement in every single show we do here on the channel going forward.
That's
So,
fine with me.
Why don't you pick their prog rock album for your choice?
Oh, you mean The Elder?
The Elder.
Older.
how in the fuck is that a prog album?
Just did.
People call that their prog album,
Because it's
Yeah, but
it's
people
got
are
a story
stupid.
behind it.
like a concept album of some sort.
Yeah. I
What-
like
what-
it. I always
what's the
like it.
concept?
Doesn't make it Prague.
Here's the concept. Let me guess. How do we milk our fans out of all their money?
I don't think they even toured for that album, did they, Pete?
no.
No,
I wonder
even
why.
I know that.
I was tortured by that record on tour. Jeff Laramie was on a fucking mission to convince me that Kiss were awesome. He would play these fucking records. You're a captive audience. You're in a van driving from point A to point B. You're fucked, right? And if you're in the back and the stereo is out of reach, what can you do? I can't even piss on the guy's head from the back, right? You just have to listen to it. And I listened to it over and over and over. No love for me.
We had those beautiful Unity, and you guys had to destroy it by bringing Kiss into the.
Do that.
I know.
You're bringing dissension into the ranks.
In every show down with the KISS talk. Oh boy.
Uh,
So to change the
Wah, wah.
subject, so we have some very special news for everybody. And I'm sure most people out there have not been counting, but a couple of weeks ago, George alerted us to the fact that we have a 100th episode coming up. 100 episodes of Prog Seat, in the Prog Seat, and that is our next episode. So
And we're going to start the alphabet all over again.
but we're going to start with Z. We're doing it the other way.
We're gonna do it with dyslexia.
Actually, what we're doing is we
We
are
use the
going to
Cyrillic language.
we're going to do a sequel to the most watched In the Prog Seat episode of all time. Prog albums that we can't stand. Part 2 is coming up 2 weeks from tonight. So hopefully we can even live up to the first one, even just a little bit. Lewis, we're not going to ask you to go to the hospital this time around, but
I was
someone-
going to say, I'm
someone
not
else
going to
wants
crack
do
my head
something
open.
crazy, go
Can
right
you-
ahead, you know?
Lewis, can you bandage your head at least?
I can bring the reservoir tip back,
Great.
but I don't want the staples and the headache. That I don't.
No, we don't want you to have to go through that. So hopefully there will be no one sending me a message at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon saying, I'm going to be on the show regardless. This was what happened to me. That's what Lewis, I was trying to convince Lewis not to be on the episode. He's like, no, I can do it. I can do it. I'm like, all right, man. So
It
so, yeah,
worked,
so
man. It worked.
It
It
did
did
well.
work.
It made for great television. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so we will be revisiting that once again for our 100th episode. So please spread the word. Tell everybody In the Prog Seat, episode number 100. We hope we can live up to the billing. And thanks everybody for watching this fun look and discussion of Trespass. Thanks to Ken for bringing this one and for driving this whole and moderating this whole conversation. So before we go, Ken's got to assign the next album study episode moderator. So Ken, pick someone else who hasn't done one yet, and they will have to come up with an album. And you don't have to divulge the album today, folks, but that'll be in 4 weeks from today, right?
I'm gonna pass the baton to Chuck. I want to see what he comes up with.
Oh, I already know what it is.
Orange isn't gonna
already
be on
picked
the
it.
episode.
Dude, if it's like a Susie and the Banshees album, I'm fucking out. So, just telling you now.
No,
The
actually,
singer's name is Peter. That's about as far as that's going.
I would say it differently. I like the fact that you have to listen to something,
Right.
because I didn't appreciate Trespass as much as I do now, and I wouldn't have without this.
And that was the whole point. That's the whole point of why we're doing this, right?
And it was
That's how
it
I
was
feel about Grand Wazoo.
I hate giving Ken any credit, but he deserves a bunch of credit. I think that it's really people who haven't really listened to that record without a preconceived idea, they should do it. Like the Grand Wazoo, right? You will discover some really great music if you just give it a chance. Just listen.
Thank you, Luis. I almost like you.
That's what I'm picking, Louise.
I can only imagine when it's Anthony's
Uh-oh.
turn, right?
Oh my god.
Everybody is gonna finish the episode drunk
Drunk.
from all the fucking drinking. That's gonna
Game
happen.
of secrets.
I'm not eating the worm at the bottom. I'm just telling you.
If it comes to that, I'm doing that episode naked. I'm just saying.
Oh wow.
Only you.
Already then.
Please, only you.
So people prevail upon this man not to do it unless you want to see me naked.
All right, Chuck,
Oh,
the
boy.
pressure's on you now.
The pressure's
All
on.
right,
The
okay.
pressure's on.
All right. I already know what the album is, and so I'll tell you guys about it later.
Okay.
All right.
So what we'll do is on the next episode, on our 100th episode, we will divulge the assignment that Chuck will be giving all of us. So we'll do that in 2 weeks. So stay tuned for Prog Albums We Can't Stand Part 2 coming up in 2 weeks. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together. All the damn time.
All the damn
Damn
time.
time.
Stay tuned later this week for the UK connection. Tomorrow will be new album review day, so we should have a bunch of stuff for you then. And we'll see you next time here on In the Prog Seat for George and Ken and Chuck and Anthony and Eric and Chad and Lewis. I am Pete, and for Stephen, wherever he might be tonight. We'll see you guys next time on In the Prog Seat. Take care.